Just a moment. Yeah, fine. Thanks. So that's just it concerning that. So today we'll be going into the Node.js runtime and the Express.js framework, which is a framework built based on Node.js essentially. So, but before that, there are some prerequisites which you must have known before, and this prerequisite is what we have kind of um, built before, we've learned before. So the first one is what I structured to be the backend pathway for us to be able to achieve the best and concrete knowledge in terms of building backend. So the first thing is to learn JavaScript. And fortunately, we've learned JavaScript during the first 4 to 5 weeks of our course. So, and now we are planning to transition into Node.js. From there, we'll go to Express.js. We'll talk about database, NoSQL and the SQL, and also talk about the authentication and authorization process that we use to secure our applications, encrypt our applications, and maybe decrypt probably where we get the data, and also build some RESTful APIs. These RESTful APIs will be built based on the CRUD operations that we know we all are familiar with, which is the create, the read, the update, the delete APIs that we have in our application. So in addition to concluding our JavaScript knowledge, I think basically we've done what we are supposed to do. So I think this write-up is just for you to just acknowledge the fact that I'm assuming, not I'm assuming, I know that we all understood everything about, or majorly 70% of JavaScript essentially, because what we'll be writing now is based on JavaScript. So also so we wouldn't be having any issue. So we've seen the firsthand and remarkable versatility and strength of JavaScript during our exploration of it, and we have understood the core components of JavaScript throughout our learning process. This is true, right? So from variables to functions, to true objects and classes. Why I'm stating this here clearly is because we'll be using them in building our backend web applications and API systems and the likes. In order to make static web pages dynamic and interactive, we've used these functions, variables, and the likes. So remember the time whereby we're using the DOM, the document object model, and everything. So we've learned how to work with document object model. Also, JavaScript has established itself as a foundation of contemporary web application, allowing us to create reliable and usable programs that work flawlessly across a range of application of platforms and devices. The ability to create high-performance, scalable, and real-time server-side apps would be unlocked in the other part of this course using Node.js. So what I'm stating clearly here using Node.js is because whatever system you see that is built based on, let's say, JavaScript runtime is coined out from Node.js. Node.js is the runtime, be it Express, Nest, they are both built based on Node.js. In fact, Express.js sits on Node.js. Next.js now derive its own functionalities from Express.js. So they both run on Node.js. So they have they specifically use JavaScript to interact. So they can use TypeScript too, but essentially they use the Node.js runtime to operate. So let us keep in mind that JavaScript, as we complete this quest, is not merely a language, but a gateway to endless possibilities in digital realm. So throughout, we have a lot of libraries, frameworks. Please don't be limited to the ones that we've kind of taught in the first part of this course, because there are a lot of JavaScript libraries that are more useful. Like, there are just kind of a lot of them. So JavaScript is obviously like a gateway, truly. It's obviously a gateway to endless possibilities in digital realm, empowering us to shape the future of technology and innovation. Also, don't forget to please endeavor to innovate and build applications that might fetch a lot of that might bring innovation to tech, and you might get your recognition from there. Also, now that we've concluded our JavaScript, and I'm trying to introduce the backend. I think this is just my close conclusion based on that. So there are some stuff that I might not repeat, but I'll tell you, remember we did this. But I'm basically sure that everything we need to use here has been covered in the first part. So now this Node.js that we are trying to learn now, what is it all about? So Node.js provides a powerful runtime environment for executing JavaScript on the server side, with the event-driven, non-blocking input and output model and the extensive ecosystem of packages. Node.js enables developers to build fast, scalable, and efficient server-side application. You see, when you write JavaScripts, when you run them, you are using Node.js runtime, which is built based on V8 engine. V8 engine comes from Chrome. You understand? So once you say, okay, run file, if you don't have Node.js on your system and you type a JavaScript file and you try to run it, it's not going to run because you are running that on Node. So take that. If you don't have Node.js on your system, make sure you can practicalize that. Remove everything pertaining to Node.js. Make sure you have a cache that involves Node.js and everything. Then create a file. Try to run that file. It's not going to run because Node is not installed on your system. You don't have the runtime. You don't have the application that reads that data that can run it. You understand? So this is they are factored together. You understand? So your ability to create servers and network applications is made possible by the Node.js platform. JavaScript code can be run outside the web browser using Chrome V8 JavaScript engine, enabling access to system resources like the file system, network, and server-side execution of JavaScript. So what I'm trying to tell you here is JavaScript does not only find its usefulness in the web browsers, it can be used outside of web browsers, which is, let's say, your server and the likes. So you can have it as your server-side rendering stuff. You understand? So it works pretty it's kind of the work it's kind of vast, and we just have kind of, I don't know how to explain Node.js better, but it has been lovely working with just Node.js better than some other stuff. But I know there are better languages that run faster than Node.js, but still Node.js has, even for the fact that it is an open source application, we still have a lot there, and it's still very cool. So this Node.js that I'm talking about, if you noticed when we were trying to run some JavaScript file, we'll just type in so thing and it's going to run. Where do these stuffs, where do they come from? We'll type, okay, mat.roundup, and it performs roundup. Mat, then we'll type in require something, do this. Where do we see these stuffs from? They are from the Node.js modules. They are the modules that have been in the Node.js before. And we use them across the system to be able to run these files. And we're able to run them due to the fact that they are running based on Node.js. You understand? So now you would go into moving probably using module.export import statements, module export statements. You will see the main reason why in React we are using, maybe we are importing our statements, and in Node.js we're using module. We are using modules, a lot of modules, you understand? So let's move on. So now this Node.js that I've been talking about, is it a server specifically? This is a question that I think a lot of people, if I should go to the streets and start asking developers that are, intermediate, high level, professional, that Node.js essentially, is it even a server on its own? No, Node.js is not a server. Node.js is not a server, because this is quite technical, and if you are in an interview, it's possible if someone fails this kind of question, because you might just feel like, what they taught me was, okay, we use Node to write codes and something and the likes like that. Do you understand? So Node.js is not a server itself, but rather a platform that allows you to build servers and execute server-side JavaScript code efficiently. It empowers developers to create high-performance, scalable, and real-time network applications on the server side using the same JavaScript language familiar from web browser development. To create a server using Node.js, we typically use its built-in HTTP or HTTPS modules, or utilize popular frameworks like Express.js, QoE, or Happy. These frameworks simplify the process of setting up a server, handling routes, middlewares, and requests, making it easier to build web applications and APIs. In essence, what I'm trying to point out here is that Node.js is not a server. But before getting to this page, I told you that it has modules in it. These modules, amongst it is the HTTP server. This HTTP server, how do we utilize it? We require it. Like, let's say, for instance, let's say we import it. Assuming we import it, we can now use that built-in HTTP server to now create a server and run that server. That's when we now run the code and say, okay, I have a backend for my application. I don't know if that's pretty much clear. I don't know. Do you get that part? It's kind of you coming in and saying Node.js is not a server, but in it adds some functionalities that can use to build web applications with it. You understand? So because if you call it a server on its own, definitely if I install it here, what I have here is what you'll be having. The function that is serving here is the same function it's serving there. But when you create a server with it, definitely you can have multiple servers on your system, and that's why you have thousands of projects on a single laptop, and you can run them without affecting each other. If Node.js is a single server on its own, definitely you have to have multiple Node.js on your system. But no, you'll be having multiple applications that you've built based on Node.js runtime engine. I hope you get that part. That's that. Okay. Now, moving further to Node.js, Express.js, because Express is what we'll be using, kind of using most, because it's gives you better experience interacting with Node.js. Instead of interacting directly with Node.js, it comes, we use it to interact with Node.js in our system, building our system, our own system. So what we have here is, on top of Node.js, Express.js is a framework for web applications to facilitate the development of web apps and APIs. It offers a high-level abstraction and a number of extra features: routing, middleware, administration, request processing, and view rendering. And view rendering are among the activities made easier by Express.js. By giving an organized and easy to use method to handle an organized web-related functionality, it expands the functionality of Node.js. Okay, what I'm trying to tell you here is, recall that at the beginning of this course, or let me say towards the mid, when we were discussing about how to, or let me say towards the tail end, when we're discussing about deploying your web app, your React, I told you that you can have your backend and you serve everything as a single application and you run your React from there. Express gives us this functionality to run static file from our backend directly. So if your backend is sitting on 3000, if you call 3000 / login page, you're going to get a login page because we are serving it using Express.js. So that's just what I'm trying to tell you, view rendering. So Express comes with a lot of view engines. We have EJS and many of them, you understand, for people that do not know front end, but they can interact with little code and write little code. So they usually use those static engines produced by Express.js, but it's not reliable because your backend can be affected because the URL that the front end is using is still the same URL that your backend is using. So it is widely open to attacks and not recommended. I don't know, you might be reading a small application, but you know that. So routing, the way we used to route in React and the likes, React Shelter DOM and the likes, to tell someone that so pages for this, so pages for this. Same thing Express offers us, that so pages for these, so pages for this. We have routing too. We have middlewares. Middlewares, like I told you, like the same thing that we have in middleware, they are just functions. So middlewares are also functions, but just that we don't want to call them functions. So they are still functions. So we have middleware administration and the likes. So lastly, in essence, Express.js is a framework or extension that makes better use of Node.js capability to construct web applications. It successfully manages HTTP requests and responses by utilizing the foundational features of Node.js, such as event-driven, non-blocking, input-output tag. So this input-output service means you can take in request and kind of deliver a request. But there is another part to it, which is synchronous, asynchronous, and concurrent running of functions. JavaScript can run multiple functions at the same time without affecting each other. So it's up to you to tell them to asynchronously work or synchronously operate. Understand? As we move further, we are going to be looking at those stuff too. Depending on how far we can assimilate and work, perform, practice, we would be able to cover as much as possible. So, but believe me, it's nothing. Just concentrate and understand the basics, and by God's grace, we won't need to do anything other than just start building up a lot of stuff. You understand? Okay. Our project setup. So I think this is my last slide before we move to the code. So sorry that I have a lot of talking this time. This was the first part of Node.js class. Setting up a Node.js just like we used to, then we'll be working with modules, handling asynchronous operations, creating the basic HTTP server, routing and middleware databases, authentication and authorization, error handling and logging, testing and debugging, and deployment and continuous integration. So where I'm trying to, let me pick from the last part. So the last part will be general. It's going to be our last lecture by God's grace. So CI/CD, once you are done with your project, then you call the CI/CD process that I explained earlier. Same thing follows. So you can have your CI/CD. Once your application is there, you just keep updating. The integration part is going to check, make sure all checks are fine, and redeploy. So if you are currently, if you've tried using Netlify, but sure you've not built any project based on NEXT. So, but if you've tried using Netlify and connected it to your GitHub account, or maybe Render, and connected it to your GitHub account, then try to update your code. So, you know, at first it deploys your project. When you rerun another deploy, when you rerun another commit, that process, that part, what the system does is we can insert, we can have a CI/CD process there that checks the code and make sure it matches and all tests are correct. Then we deliver it to then we deploy it. So after deployment and the deployment is successful and everything works fine. So if you've ever seen a server before, you see where they tell you specify health check parts. Health check parts is where the system calls. If it is successful, then the system will say your instance or your server is healthy. If not, you'll be alerted that the system has failed. What's happening? Command your health check failed or something. That's that. So I think that's all for this thing. So let's sorry, let me stop sharing setup. Okay. Okay. All right. This we're back to our code. So after some similar tests, let me now create. We have our shopping and everything. So let's create a project. Essentially, let me save this now. Let's create a separate folder to handle our backend project. So you can decide to be a backend programmer, and let's say backend. So let's just say backend. So in our backend, let's say we have a project named, we can have the shopping again, shopping API. So let's say shopping API, for instance, and let's have another one as maybe customer. Let's say customer API. Okay, now without wasting much of our time, let me open this in our integrated terminal, and let me play this terminal. So this is this, and as you can see, we have the shopping API, but let me just kind of go back so that we'll be sure that we have everything. So with this last part, you can see this is our project one, which matches with this. So definitely you are aware that this is our project one folder. Then let's list, we have the list, then let's go to our backend. Then let's list again to be able to see we have the customer API, we have the shopping API. We're going for the shopping API. So we have the shopping API now, and we have nothing there. So in order to initialize our project, don't forget we have, let's keep following. Let me just place these folders beside each other, and you can see we're setting up our project using the npm init. What the npm init is just what you're just trying to do there is just to initialize your project, and you have your package.json. It's not mandatory, but it's the best practice. So the npm init, then what is name, package name, let's say the shopping API, okay? Version 1.0, description, tutorial, for backend. Then the entry point is index.js. Then the test command, you do not have a test command, you do not have a GitHub repository. And let's say the shopping API. The author, digital skills code. Then license INC. Yes, this is okay. Fine. So now I have our package.json. You can see we have this here. So it's up to you to edit this file now. So instead of writing all this from the beginning, so you have everything just with your npm init. So you can edit it using the same npm init again. So now that we have this, how do I now start? Where do I start from? So where you start from is you create your index. You can see the other time I specified for the system that the main file, our main file will be index.js. So it could be anything, it could be any name, it's up to you, you understand? So now let's have our index.js. So we have index.js. These are index.js. But before proceeding, I usually like to have my full folder ready. So if you're having your full folder ready, definitely we proceed to creating middlewares and the likes. And don't forget, we are going to be building based on Express. So in Express, we used to have stuff like middleware, then controllers, then routes, and index, which is our last file. So this is the minimal, the basic. Aside from this, you can now have some other stuff there, you understand? So now let's just create those folders. So what the middleware is going to do is that in it, you'll be having functions. But recall that we said we have routes. So if you're having login routes, login route is now a particular file. In that login route, we might decide to have multiple functions there. A function that detects if OTP is successful. If OTP is not successful, an API for it, you understand? If the person wants to resend OTP, if we want to check the login, if we want to check if the email matches, those are middlewares. Don't forget I said it is just like a compound name for a lot of functions on that Express.js, you understand? So middlewares. So those in that middleware, you can now say login middleware, you understand? Everything all together, helping pass functions for login API to be able to deliver what we want it to deliver. You understand? So that's middleware now. So the next one now is our route. This is our route. Yeah, so our routes now is the same thing as our particular what's it called routes that we have in our React router DOM, but they do not use the same thing, but they are quite similar to each other. So what we have there is the same thing that we have here, like the way you call a URL to deliver social page. That's the same way you call a route to deliver social API to you. Understand? So that's the route. Then one other thing that I think I need to add here is the controller. So the controller now, so the controller is just like, let's say we know our middlewares comprises of what we have in our routes, but our routes now distributes to just like a tree. A tree itself has a branch, as branches. So that branches is the controller. You understand? Branches, controller being the branches. Now, each branches have different types of flowers. Let's assume that, you understand? So controller now separates to routes. Routes is now the different colors that the tree produces. In that color, we have it comprising of green, red, and the likes, which is the route. So the route is an API call which now has green, red, something. Green, red would now be green function, red function, blue function, which are all termed as middlewares. You understand? So that's just the basic thing there. That's just the basic. So far so good. I think we are 50 minutes gone. Let me just ask one or two questions based on how far, like, I view what's so far. So let me just pause and what's up, Mr. Tokwe, Mr. Emmanuel? What do you have to say?
Yeah, I'm following. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I think it's going well.
Right. Am I too fast?
No, no, no.
The speed is okay. I'm following too.
All right, no problem. That's fine. Okay. Now that we have everything, okay. So one thing that I need to explain to you is ECMA scripts, ECMA script, and the ES6, which are used in JavaScript. So the ECME and ES6 script, recall that in our React, we are using import statement, which is from the ES6. So now here we'll be using the require module, which is from the ECME script. So why are they different is that Node.js comprises of a lot of modules existing in it before. Just like we have a constructor comprising of a publicly available super props. You understand? You know, with that, we can derive and say this dot so thing in our constructor. So to change that now, we have to say we cannot from outside now say this is something that does not exist in it. If you are saying if we have this dot name is equal to so thing, obviously when we're doing constructor, I told you that you cannot call ordinary name except you've made it available in your constructor when you're writing classes. I hope you're able to connect those stuffs together. So now the same thing is here in Node.js. We have existing modules before. These modules that are existing before are what makes build up and makes up what we have in Node.js to be able to run it as a server-side application. For you to now import something, you are destructuring what is in the module that we have already, because these modules are objects. The object is the fact that objects, when I say objects, object is like a basket that you have a lot of stuff there. How will you now say basket is equal to I want this basket to be I want you to put this blanket in this basket. Previously, the basket has HTTP connection. Now you told your child that you want this basket to only have my blanket. This blanket is what you want to see there. Now, in the other file, you are now trying to say, let me call HTTP connection. When you've already disposed what is in the basket before and you're having HTTP and you're having only your blanket, you can see that is not possible. But in ES6, you can import and export easily because your import from one file to another is not a module import. It is just an import statement, an export statement. That's just a brief explanation. As we move further, I'll try and explain better. So now in the middleware, let me just create, let's say we're trying to log in, we're trying to create a login stuff. Let's say login, let's say login.js. And also here, we are not creating components. So you would not see anything like JSX. You understand? We are just having, what's it called? We're having JS only file. Yeah. So now let's say we have const login function. So login function, then this and that. So what's wrong with this function is just that we have something that we're not supposed to have here, and this is what we are meant to have here, and we have this, and we're going to go with this. So we have this, or better still, you write your pure function. So because I'll be using pure functions across whatever it is that I'll be building, it's our backend. So actually there is no difference, So but I just prefer to have a uniform something across your application. So in APIs, we have what we call request and we have what we call response. This request and response is what we usually check in our console, in our network tab. The other time, I hope you can recall that we used to check our console, our network tab, and say, oh, this request is not successful. Is this request even successful? Oh, this response is not this response is not that. We are taking control of what is happening there. We can set request headers. We can set request and response. We can set response, but you cannot set request headers. In some cases, you might be able to set request headers, but it's actually a rare case because the front end sets the request headers, while the back end sets the response headers. Why? Is because we are calling an API, we are sending requests from the front end. If we are returning an API, we are sending a response to you. So in that kind of formation, we have the request and the response. So who handles the request now is the front end. Who handles the response now is the back end. So after the whole logic, we return what is it that we have to the person there. Okay, we need to deviate a little bit and see what is it that we're trying to say here. Okay, we need to deviate a little bit. So let me open, okay. So before we proceed further, I need to explain Postman to you. So Postman and some other popular API testing platforms like Swagger and the likes. So we use them to test our APIs. So this is where we generate data from and say, okay, so thing and so stuffs. Okay, if you are employed as a backend developer, you can now say, oh, the API is working, the API is not working, this and that and that, and what's happening here? Why do we have this like this and some other stuffs like that? So let me just create a new API and tell you how this works before I call an API for us here. You have this tab now. Shit, I'm coming. Okay, yeah. Sorry for delay. Okay, all right. So we have this now, which is our collection. So this collection is digital skill. It's a skill school. So what we are trying to do here is we're trying to call APIs and the likes. Then this is what we'll be using across our application. This is just for us to be able to test APIs. So in authorization, you would basically try to download Postman if you don't have it, and if you have it already, fine, that's perfect. So in our authorization, this is why I'm bringing this up is to explain further what I'm trying to say by request headers. This is where we set the request. Recall that in our APIs here in the front end, we used to do something like, let me see where we've tried calling an API and see if there is, so I want to see if there is a place whereby we've called let me just, okay, we haven't done that. Let me see if I can see headers. Okay, we haven't. Well, that's fine. So headers, when we start calling those APIs from the front end, those headers is still the same thing as what you're seeing here, which is the authorization. So your authorization could be an API key, bearer token, JWT bearer, basic auth, digest auth, hot, OAuth 1.0, hot 2.0, hawk authentication, AWS signature, NTLM, or Akamia. So auth 1 and auth 2, so that when you start saying things, it doesn't get strange. Do you know that when they tell you log in using your Google account, they're using auth 2.0? I don't know if you're aware. That process that you're seeing is auth 2.0, whereby you use a single sign-in to sign into your application from Google directly into other applications that are on your system. So you're using auth 2.0. These things are what you should know, so that when you see them happening, when a particular system is telling you log in with your LinkedIn, log in with your something, log in with your this thing, you're trying to use a particular functionality that you also know about. So that's just the part. So pre-request scripts, these are scripts that run before the request. So your test and your variables. So the test you could have some tests here, but we won't be going into this. But if you want to have a test, you can have a test there. So depending on the kind of request they are trying to run, but let's add a particular this thing first to this stuff. Now, under this same stuff, let's add maybe an API. I think we're done with this. Let's just add an API to it. So under this, let's add an API. Under this untitled request, you can call it the name that you like. Let's say maybe this login API. That's what you want to call. The read, write, update, delete, that's you find them here. This is where you can pick the API type, the API verb that you want to call. We call them verb, get, post, put, and that. So under this puts, you can see these headers. I'm telling you, these are the headers, keep alive and likes. So at some point in time, keep alive, the way keep alive works at some point in time is that once you're trying to strike an application and the application is down, keep alive can wait for the system to come up before it strikes the application. You might have not seen that practical experience, but as a move on, you are going to see that kind of stuff here. So the authorization is what I'm trying to tell you here, that you can use any type of authorization here, but specifically we'll be using bearer token. So params is the parameters that you have in your URL. So how do we declare parameters is by saying maybe so thing. In your own API, you might say this user ID or something, but here you're having the params at this, you understand? So these are URL params URL params. So if you type another one, it is going to add an and here at the back of that E. So you can see it as an and, then declare the value of that. So params in any type of request attach itself to the URL. So that's how params works in APIs. So that's what we have here. But what if it is not, you are not using a param, you are not using params, but you are using body. The body is the body of an API call, which is usually, this cannot be URL encoded. It could be a form data. Once we tell you form data is when you are trying to send an image from the front end to the back end. So you can try to call an API with an image, video, or something. Maybe you want to upload an image to YouTube. You are doing a form data API request. You understand? So you have the ability to now say, okay, I want to pick an image or file here. That's why you now select a file from your system. You understand? So essentially, you're still doing the same thing. So the prerequisite scripts, I can explain, test, and then some other settings that you can set. So, but before we do that, let's get to our API and build something with it. So now we have this. So in our system, we have login, which is login function. So how do I now make this login function available in my application here? So we do module.export. So module.export is equals to, so remember I was telling you about the basket or no basket issue, an object or no object. So this will have our login function. So exposing this, we are exposing our login function to be available globally in our application. If you want it to be available globally across your system, one is not making sense. Why one is not making sense there is because you are not deploying your whole system or your own laptop to the internet. You are deploying, what we will be deploying here is the shopping API. You understand? So we are already making it available in that part. So now let's proceed further and say probably we want to require the module. So previously it is import and export, right? Now we require that module, and let's say const name of the API. Then maybe I won't write that currently. Require. So where is it? It is in our what's it called application. It is in our root application. So which is still in our middleware, then in our login middleware function. So with that, recall that, let me save this file and say login function. So let me go and call the function since I've already exported it there. So we have login function. So login function, and that's all. So you understand, that's all. So after that, you can say, let's say, sorry, before we run it, let's say console, let's just say console.log login function. And in our login function, let's say we are returning a statement, let's say return this and say, so module, okay, sorry, it is module.export, not module.export, module.export, export. So, and we are having, sorry, notice, yeah. So you can see, you can use this to confirm that the file are available. So now let's console this and say, and launch this particular file. But in Node.js, how do we now run our files? How do we run ourselves? So let's call the node name. So kind of situation I would say, remember that we are shopping API node in login function. You get, so login function, why is it not returning what we have here? Remember that we did not invoke that particular function. Now let's invoke it and call the function, then call the node again using our stuff, our usual stuff. You can see we have our text here. You understand? That's it. How did you do this? Is by doing the require method. You understand? Now, what about the inbuilt modules that I talked about? Now, let's start creating our server. Let's say const http is the name of the server I want to create. It could be anything. Remember that const name of your variable could be anything in life if you are not destructuring. You understand? So another in Node.js, part of it is the function we are trying to do now is create an HTTP server. With this, we have to run HTTP in Node.js. Now, using this kind of system, what do? Now create a server. So usually our app server is always our API server. Like the name, conventional name that people call it, oh, my app server is down, my API server is down. It's up to you. So API, let's say API for instance, API equals http.create server. So creating the server, we've created an instance of an API server on our system in this application. You know, to say, okay, API.listen. I'm telling the application to listen. What are we trying to tell the application to? Port what? Let's say 3009. 3309. Then we launch a function that tells us that, oh, the application is currently running truly. So if this listening is successful, then we can say console log application successful running. App successful. So with this now, we can now say this and we can save this in, run our application and say, you can see application successful. Our application has started running on 3009. So we can cut this down and save them. Same thing, application is running. You can see the application is widely open. Why is it widely open and it's not giving us what you're having? It's because it is, let's have this and have a normal application back then. Maybe do this and close the system and run the system again. You can see what we have. We have the system running what we have here and responding straight up. Once to create a server, we are ready to do the needful. In Node.js, it assumes that once you tell it to listen, just like someone that is running a relay and wants to collect the baton, he or she cannot face front. He or she will always wait the baton on his hand. Like, you understand? The person gives the baton to him or her, then it picks up from there. So yeah, too, it listens. And once a request comes in, it attends to it and run. You understand? So that's just the same thing that we have here. With this now, we've created a server. We can even deploy this and that's all. You understand? So nothing, and you do not require anything and the likes. So this is just a simple server in Node.js. You understand? So with this now, we can now say maybe a request or URL or something, then you can say let's say request, let's just say request or response, response, then response dot status status code, or let's say response dot end and let's call 3000 and okay, HTTP then /, then let's say localhost, then the port number, which is 3309, and send the request. So get connection failure because our system is not listening currently on the port. Okay, so now let's get this sorted. It's an application successfully running. So we do not define the kind of system. And as you can see, we have a successful API call, which is this. So with this, we've been able to call an API with the server that we created. So if I should deploy this and tell you to call the API, you are going to get this kind of request. But we did not specify the URL for anything, and the API is successful. Why? It's because we only told the system that run this request. You understand? Hope you get the logic. Let me take a quick few seconds break and ask. Any issue so far? Any questions so far?
Concerning the API, okay, we have to deploy it first before you can call it.
No, you don't have to deploy it. I'm just taking that. I'm just saying that as an instance. So your deployment is still what you are doing here, which is node index.
All right.
So you are running the old test here. So, and you have your API. Remember, let's say what I want to return here is, okay, we are in class. We have class. So, and let me save this and say, let me call this API again. You can see, okay, yeah. And let me run this again. You can see we are in class with this. You do not have to cram anything here. Once you practice and practice, you know that your request is your request. These two things that you are seeing here are ordinary words. You can write it in full, but they don't have to be two. You understand? So, any other question before we proceed, Mr. Imani?
Yes, okay. So the .end and API.listing, these are keywords, I guess.
Yes, they are keywords.
Okay.
So the end there is telling Node.js to end that particular request. So if you don't end a request, what's going to happen? Now, let me show you what's going to happen. The request keeps on pending. It keeps open. So you have this now, node index, and I say call an API. Can you see we are sending the request, but there is no response. Why is there no response? Because the API does not end that particular request. You understand? Let's say we have a lot of functions here. And for instance, you know, I told you this login function is a middleware. Let's say I have let me now lift what I have on line 13. So what I have here. So we have this like this. Let me save and let me cancel. You know, this is still pending, but if I do this, can you see we have circuit hanged because the server died without giving a response. Again, we don't have a response still, and let me send the request. You can see the request here as console logged what I have here. But still, it's still hanging, and that's why we have the system pending, hanging without a response. So the relay, the guy fell on while running and could not complete the whole journey. You know, the person that's meant to take the battle next cannot run back and say, okay, I want to go and take the battle next. That's not the rule of the game. You understand? So same way that you cannot have someone end the request once you do not end the request yourself. How does that sound? I hope that's pretty much clear.
Yes, it is. Then my second question is, when you are creating server and use HTTP, So at the point of deployment, you want the server to run on HTTPS. Do you have to come back and create your API using HTTP and HTTPS?
Actually, there is a way we can set up HTTPS there. So you can serve your security file, your PEM and your PEM key and your certificate key. You serve it from the HTTP server and it gets secured whenever a request comes in. Like when you send an HTTPS request in, it secures the request and answers. You understand? But in the case of Nginx, Apache, and some other web servers, and some other reverse proxy servers that we use online, we take in HTTPS connection to that particular Apache or Nginx or whatever you're using, then proxy the request to our HTTP server, because it is just like as you are where you are. I can have a particular request coming in from a domain to my laptop's IP address. Now, my laptop IP address is just a normal HTTP connection from my laptop. Then I'll proxy that request to the local host of 3009. I hope you get.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So once we get to the deployment stage, you understand what I'm saying better. So now, if I should use any type of verb to send my request, even if it is patch or anything, let me open up this and back and restart this up. So I've restarted the server and send the request. You can see I'm still getting my request. And if it is copy or anything, I would still get the response to my request, to my API request. So how do we factor that in? How do we detect what's issue? How do we do that? Actually, we are not meant to do this deeper till we get to Express, but we just have to understand the nitty-gritty of how you can use Node.js as a simple server, assuming that you were in the era whereby Express has not been deployed to the internet as an open source application, open source framework. Now, what you do then, this is where you come in with, let's say, console.log with your debugging skills. You say, okay, my request will definitely have a particular response, HTTP headers or something. So what's the method? The method is the kind of request. So your method in APIs, what are those verbs? These stores. In methods, what are those methods? The methods are still these verbs. So let me save this and run our server. So you might be wondering, about senior lecturer, is this how we'll be restarting our server every time we want to? No, this isn't it, but we have to take it a step after the other. So now let's launch our request again in class. So you can see the kind of request you are getting now is a GET request. With this now, you can now say, okay, if it is going to be a GET request now, let me say const, let me destructure the request protocol, which is REQ. So, but for clarity, we can call this request and we can call this response. So this now request, and this does not function again. And we have this. So we can now say in our request, we can have it to be method of our request. We can now say if method is equals to a GET request. You're trying to say, if you say if method is equals to GET, you're trying to say it is a GET request. If method is equals to, if method again is equals to post, you're trying to say it is a post request. If method, okay, I'm sorry, let me have it to be else if. So, but else, if it is not part of these request protocols, what should I do? Let me do response dot status code. So what would be my status code? Let me say 400 and end that particular transaction. And then let's say end, and let me end with, okay, failed to get API. Failed to get API. If you failed to get API, then we can now save this and say, okay, that's fine. Let me do this. But before I do that, let me do this again. Let me copy this and say, oh, sorry. Let me copy this and paste it here. So if we should send a GET request, what are we expecting? We're expecting this. If we should send an if we should send any other request aside from the post and the GET, we should be getting this, right? So let's save this file and let's cancel this and restart the server. So after restarting the server, we have application successful. So if we send this, we're getting socket ANTO. Why is there a mistake somewhere? I did not restart the server after which it crashed. Now let me now send a request. We're in class, okay? What about a patch request? So we are having an error. So which says that response of status code. Oh, so status code is not from Node.js runtime. Status should be from Node.js. Okay. Oh, and have. Well, okay, no problem. Let me write it then. Right. What file can I use here? Let me write. Let me write the method. That is still not going to take that. Okay, apologies. I'm trying to write. I want to write that header in such a way that it doesn't send a 200 request this time around, but a failed request. So we are still getting a failed request. So we're getting failed to get API, but this is not actually what I wanted to send. I want the system to send a request like, okay, we are sorry, we could not send, we could not get this thing, we could not get your API. So you can see we have 400 here, 200 here. So what if I save this and say, okay, Node.js again, and I sent a new request. You can see what are we getting here? We're getting 400 batch requests. How did I do that? How did I do that is that when someone sends a request, you're sending a patch request to our API that comprises of GET and POST requests. How we cannot answer that request? Definitely, we are telling you, we are writing the head. Remember before we used to see 404 unauthorized, 400 bad requests. Some 400 requests are failure, 500 are internal servers, 200 are successful. So 200, 2xx, 4xx bad, 5xx internal server, 2xx success. You understand? So I want it to end here, but here this is a failure. That's why I'm saying 400. You can see we have 400 here to be bad request. That's fine, right? Okay. Now, any request can come in from any URL and respond to our system. The system does the same thing. We need to now differentiate. How do we now differentiate now? Let's come in with another thing. So let's comment this out. Let's debug together and say, let's say request URL. Now let's console log URL. So with the usual saying, please do not cram anything. So I also did not cram anything, but at this stage, you can still write something down or something. Remember that this request is not going to be complete because we didn't end that request, but this is what we need. You can see the URL of our request. This is the URL of our request. So we are trying to debug. So let's say if method is equals to, now let's uncomment this, since you are done testing that, okay, URL is going to supply that to you. Since you can say if this method is equals to get request and my URL is equals to /login, send or /class, send we are in class. If it is post and it is / and URL is equals to /login, say login successful, or let's say maybe is equals to create, maybe someone wants to create an account. You know, if you're trying to create an account, what the ideal request header should be what? 201 created. If it is a successful request, the ideal API response should be what? 200. So we write the head. What do we write in the head now? Let's write 201. And end, we'll end the API call. So, but before we end the API call, I would like us to have a particular console there, so that we'll be able to distinguish that so thing occurred here, so thing occurred here. And also we'll be having the URL there. So we're in class, let's say account successfully created. Let's say account success. So just to have a short word. And let me copy this and paste this here. Then let me copy this. We're in class, then paste this in this URL. So per API call, we're expecting 2 things for these 2, but for the last one, we're expecting a 400. So let's save this and let's restart this server. So restart. Okay, fine. So now let's say an API failed to get API. Why? Because none of this, the URL does not matches what we have here. Now let me copy this and let me create a new API here. So I have a new API here, which is a get request, but I don't want it to be. Let me put it as a put request to our class, which is class. Then let me send again. Again, I'm still getting the same thing. Why? Because class exists truly, but it does not use a request verb of put, it uses get. So now let me launch it to be get and let me call the API again. We are in class. Now let me proceed to testing our post request. So I'm testing our API, and once I come to post, I want to post and say create. Now let me send a request. Account success. I know it's a lie though, because we didn't create any account. Then if you should check here, request status, what can you see? You can see 201. And for the previous one that we did here, just undo. Let me just, for the previous one we did here, what do we have? We have 200. Okay. You can see the difference between writing request headers. This is necessary. It's necessary for you to write response headers. Why is it necessary to write response headers? Is because when you get to the professional level now, someone you are writing API for, and you write 400 for an account success, that does not match it up with what we have. The account has been successfully created, and you write 400 as requested. Does that match? No, because 400 interprets to be a bad request. You understand? So that's it. So let me take a look at that. So how are we getting along? Is it making sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's actually far better than front end of me.
It's just going.
It's far better now.
It's too early to conclude, but for now, I
Yes.
think it is.
Well, I didn't say it's far better. So I didn't say it's far better, but it's fine. So okay. Sorry, give me a few points. I want to set up something. All right. Okay. So this is fine. So this is how you keep going based on what you're doing. Now, this same thing that you see here, that you're using your Postman and you're using your this thing. If I may ask specifically about Postman, I hope you are getting it. Actually, I meant to cut this class to tell you how Postman works very well, because you might need to you might get a project interview and they tell you to, call these social APIs for us and document the APIs for us. How do you do that now? APIs in what's called in Postman. It's also nice knowing about APIs, creating APIs and the likes in Postman. Let's say, for instance, now I give an assignment that with everything that we did here, call all APIs and give reports based on them. How do you do it? How do you create a report in Postman? Now, let's get started. So we have what we call save. You can see what you see. You can see this here. You have save. So you can save all APIs that you have. Now, let's say I want to save this here. Now, save this first. So, but I can add a description that this API is a GET request to know the number of people in class, to know if a class is ongoing. So you save this, you can save this somewhere. It's up to you, you can save it somewhere. So, that's an API. So everything you save is going to fall here. You can see this one now. Now, I called two APIs previously. This is the other one. So let me just log in. I think the other one is login. And it is a post request, right? Let me try testing the API. Failed to get API. What's wrong? Okay, well, it's a create API, not. Now, let's post, then account success, right? You can save this API too. So we'll just save and say, we'll add description. This API is used to create new user. Okay, so we save these two. So we have two APIs now. So you can switch between APIs. You can see it's quite easy. So you can close this tab. Then since you have your collection, it's going to, put the data together itself. I don't have this second one there, but as you can see, it writes the API for me. So if you want to have this page, currently now, this page is not open. These two APIs are not open. But if you click on it, you can see this text are slant somehow. Oh, sorry. Can you actually see my code editor very well? Is it clear?
It is.
Wow. I remembered that we used to zoom it and I forgot to do that. So that's why I'm asking. Oh, sorry. Okay, but since it's okay. So you can see, so if you want to have this, part of the functionality that this gives us, you can, once you double click, this will be opened and you can have another one opened beside it and you can navigate through. So what we are essentially doing here is just to save APIs so that we can be able to refer back to them. Now, how do we write API documentation? I don't know if you've ever heard about API documentations. So API documentations are what API does. How do we do it? What are the functionalities? What does this API does? But during the introduction of Swagger and the likes, you do not have to necessarily start writing API documentations one by one. It's so stressful. But there is no cons in knowing all these stuff. You might be working with conventionally be using Postman, not Swagger as their documentation. So you might still need to go and learn Postman, but Postman is just is a UI, not an IDE per se. So it's just easy for you to learn that. So just come here beside your this thing, and you can start writing parts of your documentation. So you can see what kind of body your API uses. So you can have the edit button here to edit your documentation, and you can also perform some other functionalities too with the system. So you have here to write comments based on that, and you have here to determine the kind of stuff. So once you export your API documentation, this documentation in Postman, once I log in, once I sign in, you can publish your API documentation. So if I send it to you over there, you can pull those APIs, you can pull the documentation, test those APIs one by one successfully without having to, starting to write, create, class, and the likes. So as you guys work together, Mr. Tokwe can create all APIs. Mr. Temitope can say, Mr. Emmanuel can say, oh, I don't have much time. Let me just test those APIs and see what's up with it. So you publish, you get those APIs, and whatever response that Mr. Tokwe is getting from the APIs will be shown clearly there. And you can also come to class and say, oh, I've seen the APIs, they work successfully. Once you click on so, once you make those requests, it produces this kind of request. With that, or maybe Mr. Tokwe is interviewing Mr. Emmanuel, or Mr. Emmanuel is interviewing Mr. Tokwe. You understand? Reverse case or something. So test those APIs. Let me know what's up. Once you test them, you forward it to the board. Mr. Tokwe is the board, or Mr. Emmanuel is the board. You understand? It checks and see, okay, what the backend guy did is truly correct. And so you understand? Then we proceed to maybe deployment or something. You understand? Or proceed to saying, okay, so people that want to integrate with us can now come in because we've tested our APIs and we're sure they work perfectly. You understand? So here you can determine what we have here is called. You can determine you can decide to have maybe an HTTP, anything based on the kind of language you want to use, JavaScript, Fetch, and many more, C# and the like. So you see, you have as many as possible here. So it's up to you. So after writing all this, you can decide to copy it. So, and you know what, place it here. So you can place it here and call the API something. So I'm not gonna do this. Okay, yeah. So this is fine. Then also we have some other functionalities there that allows you to be able to write more stuff, document your project. In fact, export your project, and you know what, add a whole lot of stuff there. So, but per se, what you need to understand, I've shown you basically what is there and some other stuff. So once I sign in, there are some other functionalities that I would I have to show you then, but now I don't want to sign in. So I'll just show you. Maybe by this class, I'll just try to roll that alongside the way we are learning this together. Okay, so let's just cancel this and proceed with what we have. So we have two APIs now for this. Perfect, right? Now, in our post request, we want to, before we tell the person account success, we want to determine what that person is sending to us. If the person is sending, want the person to send your first name, send your last name, and the like. So how do we get that? You come to your destructuring again and say body. So body, or let me say data. Body or data of your request. You can say body, you can say data. So depending, at times your data or body in fetch request, you send body. In what's called request, you send data. In Axios, you can say data. In fetch, you can say body. But if you do not define what you're calling, it still doesn't mean. You understand? So, but once you call your body is going to respond to your particular data. So let's just log body of the request. So body of the request, what's the body? The body is what you're seeing here. So, but that's in our create request. So just come to the create request. Then the tick mark that you have here is what do you want to send and what is it that you do not want to send. So I don't want to send this. Why I want to send this? So let's say name is Yusuf. So lecture is DSS. So these two are what I want to send. So once I click on send, you'd see we get the request. So but we have account success and we're having body and request are supposed to follow. Sorry. Coming. Just oh sorry. I did not restart the server. No, okay. So let me send the request again, and you can see we have undefined. It shouldn't be have the name and the body. Extra encoded and okay, coming. Just give me a moment. So we should be able to get supported from this request. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I actually need to restart again. Okay, just a moment. Content media and collect. Okay, all right, no problem. I think I missed a word there, but maybe probably before the end of the class, I should remember what that particular word should be, but I'm pretty much sure it's just some sort of I missed the word there. Sure. So I'll just try and recall what that is essentially. So sorry about that. Should come alongside with the requests. Okay. Okay. All right, no problem. In order not to waste much of our time, I think we'll just proceed while I omit the part. That's so bad, but no problem. Let's just proceed and we respond to that later. Okay, no problem. So what I'm trying to do there is that I'm trying to set a request for us so that we can be able to see what comes out of the request once we send the request to the system. So unfortunately, I currently could not get that from this Node.js HTTP server. So it's a cause. So I was just trying to troubleshoot that and get back to you based on that essentially. Yeah, okay. So now we proceed to installing Express. So I'll just kind of do the peripheral today. Then as we move on, we'll just kind of talk about what it is, what it entails, and what we have to do because we cannot cover much in the remaining parts that we have left for today. No problem. So Express is installable just like other packages. It's a framework, but you can still have it installed in your system. So, but before we check out Express, it has its own documentation too. So you have the Express doc. So you can go to the Express doc and see what's up with it. It might look complex, somehow cumbersome or something, but it's just easy to set up and every other thing. So now, but before we get to that level, instead of killing our server and coming up again, why don't you have an automatic runtime process? So there's a particular package called NodeMon. NodeMon allows you to be able to run your server once any changes is being made to your server. So how do we do this? It's just to do the node npm install NodeMon. So I need the npm install NodeMon. So once you install the NodeMon, you have the NodeMon up and running. How do you run the NodeMon? So you run the NodeMon using just NodeMon command and the application is successful. Don't forget it's the same thing that we have the other time when we did node run index.js, node index.js. So it's if you might not need if the name of your server is quite different from index, so you might need to specify the name. Let's say maybe server.js or something. So you might need to specify the name. So once I make any changes and I control save, you can see the server restart, but those words does not match, so it's not going to run. So you understand? So we have application success again. So our app is up and running, and we have that. So we have our class, we have our create, we have we can also create our login. We can now create our login. So which uses this thing, and we say /login. And we have this. So you can see once we saved the file, it came up again and we can access it. So now we can create another API and say login. So login is a post request and it's going to give us account success or account successfully logged in. So with login, so you can see account successfully logged in. So this same account successfully logged in, I can bring it and put it in my end request, and we have this. So having this now, you can say, you can call this API and you see account successfully logged in. So with this, we have the system up and ready to take a whole lot of requests. So far, so good. Questions before the end of the class? Hello.
Hello?
Hello. Yeah. do you have any questions to say after what we've done today?
I don't have a question. I don't really have question. I'll just need to like go over it, the recorded class.
All right. That's perfect sense. That would make a whole lot of sense. Like going through the methods and the this thing. So instead of having everything in a single page, you can as well refer to your middlewares that we have here. So instead of writing everything that we have here, your middleware can serve the same thing. I hope you understand. So our middleware is essentially what we use to run all our programs in the whole system. So instead of having a full page like this, you can see the way we have our console.log login function. So we can pass in our login function to that API, to that particular middleware. Then the middleware now performs the function for us, and boom, our system is going to be able to answer requests. I hope you get the logic.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So that's how it's essentially works. So a whole lot of ways that you can cut this system down, the way it is modeled up. But we usually use this to explain how the whole system works to us, just to be able to have a full background knowledge of how the HTTP server is being, let me use the word transcoded into into the framework Express.js. You understand? So that's just it. So from Mr. Jimenez, and any question? Hello.
Okay, so Mr. Tope, no question from my side for now.
No problem. I think,
Okay, no, just one, I beg you. On the method where you use gets, like if method is get and URL equals to class. So I can't see any method that you're calling as class. I know you can. So I really don't get that aspect.
okay. So for the method is your API verb.
Yes.
URL now, I defined the URL that is equals to class. What I'm just trying to say is, if someone is calling a URL that matches up with /class, so API should respond. So this should respond to that request. This is what is going to respond to that request. But if the person is calling it, and because the /class is just an ordinary string, but that's what I want. You understand? So yours could be / anything. The / anything is just the URL segment. You understand? It's just the
I
URL
guess.
that you want to handle login or class or anything with. You understand? So if you want to handle login, you want to be able to log in. So the segment you want is / login. So if anybody is calling / login with an additional n after the last n, definitely you don't want it, because that's not the API that you use to handle login requests.
Okay, I understand.
So that's just what that is. It does not. It depends on you. It does not necessarily have a
Can be any
specific.
class, can be
It can be
just
anything.
like the yeah.
So it's just an ordinary word. So you can decide to build your own application and not define your login to be / login, or to be / maybe some other things. Let's say register, sign in, or anything. Yes, sir. So, but today we've been able to use this server and to call APIs with this server. So hopefully by our next class, we'll be using our application itself, our front end, not Postman, but I love testing with Postman before proceeding to using the main front end to test that so thing works, because it gives me full certainty that this API works before I proceed to my front end. So I don't know if that is pretty much clearer. Is that fine, Mr. Emmanuel?
Yes. So,
All right, no problem. I think this is the end of today's class. Let's enjoy the remaining 1 hour of our weekend. Let's get back to work. Sure. Right, no problem. Have a nice time.
yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.